Hey everyone, have you ever just scrolled through Facebook and noticed how many news photos just feature men? I mean, really noticed it.
Yeah.
I have to admit I didn't until we got this Pew Research Center study for today's deep dive.
Okay.
So we're talking, visual gender representation in the news.
That's
and
interesting.
Buckle up because this is pretty wild.
In the data skies, we take our flight. Trends and numbers come to life. Colors and charts, they dance and play. Showing truth in a visual way. In GenderDecoded, we uncover truths and stories like no other. In the data waves we find the secret maps of humankind.
Ever scrolled through your Facebook feed and thought about all those faces staring back at you from the news? Who's always front and center in those photos next to the headlines?
Hell yeah.
You'd think it'd be pretty even, right? Men and women. Well, get this.
Wow.
A new study from the Pew Research Center looked at all those news images from the big U.S. outlets shared on Facebook.
Okay.
And guess what? Men show up way more often.
Really?
Twice as often as women, actually.
Wow. That's a big difference.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
So today we're diving deep into their research to figure out what's going on with gender in all those news photos we see.
It is interesting. It makes you wonder about the visual side of news.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
This study is really cool because they used machine vision,
Oh, wow.
which is you're basically giving a computer the ability to see and understand photos.
So it can look at tons more images than a person could.
Yes.
So, way more objective, too.
Yeah.
What they find.
Well, the numbers are kind of stark.
Okay.
Over half the images, only men. Just men.
Wow.
Less than a quarter showed only women.
Mm.
It really does make you think.
If you were walking into a room full of all these news stories,
Yeah.
it'd be mostly dudes.
Yeah. It'd be pretty male-dominated, that's for sure.
Of course, news doesn't have to perfectly reflect the whole population.
Right.
It's about 50-50 men and women.
Exactly.
But when 2/3 of all the images have men, you got to wonder what's up with that.
Yeah. It's a pretty significant difference.
Right. And sure, some topics naturally have more men or women.
If you're covering professional football.
Right. Or the Senate.
Exactly.
But this gap makes you think there might be something deeper going on.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if maybe this visual imbalance is reinforcing some of those societal ideas about power,
Totally. Whose voices we think matter.
Yeah. And whose stories are important enough to pay attention to.
Right. Whose stories are we seeing, even? It's more than just how many men versus women.
Uh-huh.
The study also looked at images with, groups of people.
Right.
And what did they find?
Well, they found that even within those group photos, men still tended to outnumber women.
So even when women are included, there's still fewer of them.
Yeah, that's what the research suggests.
Huh.
And it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
They also found that men's faces actually take up more space in the photos.
Wait, what?
On average, men's faces are about 10% larger than women's faces in these news images.
So it's not just about how many faces, but how big they are, too.
Exactly. Think about the subtle message that sends.
Whoa.
If we're always seeing these bigger images of men,
Yeah.
could that subconsciously make us think they're more important?
It's possible. Visually, they're taking up more space.
Literally dominating the image.
Yeah. And that could definitely play a role in how we perceive authority and influence.
Now, here's where things get even more interesting. They didn't just look at overall numbers.
Uh-huh.
They actually categorized the news images into different topics.
Oh, that's smart.
Entertainment, the economy, immigration, and sports.
Okay.
So they could see if certain types of news were more likely to show men or women.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they found.
Me too.
So which topics had more women?
Well, actually, the smallest gap was in entertainment news.
Interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But even there, men were still more prominent overall.
Huh. What about the economy?
That one had the biggest gap.
Really?
Women were way less common in those photos.
Wow. Think think about it, if we're always seeing men as the faces of finance and business,
Right.
what does that say about women's roles in the economy?
It really makes you think.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if I see these patterns when I'm scrolling through my Uri newsfeed.
Yeah, it's a good question for everyone to consider, I think.
Like, what kinds of news tend to show more women and why?
Exactly. It's all about raising awareness and starting to notice these visual biases.
Because maybe if women are less visible in certain topics,
It could actually affect how people see their expertise in those areas.
it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah,
It's a great starting point for a deeper conversation
totally.
about how these images might be shaping our perceptions.
For sure.
And it's important to remember, this study, it didn't actually look at what the news stories were saying. It just focused on those images, you know?
Right.
So there's like a whole other layer to explore there.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how do the words and the pictures work together to like shape how we understand gender roles?
Totally. And it's not just about Facebook either, right?
This is just one little piece of the puzzle.
Like a snapshot.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to look at other platforms too.
See how it plays out everywhere.
I'm kind of curious, what do you think about using machine vision for this kind of research?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it's super helpful for like analyzing tons of data.
Right. Way more than a human could handle.
But those algorithms, they're still trained by people.
So there could still be bias.
It's always a possibility, even if it's unintentional.
That's true.
It's a good reminder that we need to be careful.
Yeah. Like, not just take the results at face value.
Exactly.
We always need to think about the methods.
Right. And any potential biases that could be in there.
But still, even with those limitations, this study's pretty mind-blowing, don't you think?
It is. I mean, it makes you realize when we're reading the news, we're not just getting information. We're also taking in all these visuals.
It's like a whole other story running alongside the words.
Exactly. And sometimes those visuals might be telling a skewed story.
Yeah.
One that leaves out like half the population.
It's crazy to think about.
It is.
You know, one of the things that really hit me was that thing about how men still outnumber women in group photos.
Right. Even when women are in the picture, there's still fewer of them.
It's like that saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Representation matters.
If young girls are constantly bombarded with these images of men like leading and being in charge, it makes you wonder if they start to think those spaces aren't for them.
Yeah, it's a valid point. I mean, seeing yourself reflected in positions of power.
Yeah.
Like seeing someone who looks like you doing the things you dream of.
Right.
It sends a powerful message.
Right.
Hey, this is possible.
Totally. But if you never see those examples...
And then it can make those paths seem less accessible.
Like they're not even an option.
Yeah.
It's about opening up possibilities.
Absolutely.
Showing that women can be CEOs, scientists, athletes, politicians.
Anything they set their minds to.
Exactly. And maybe changing what we see is a big part of that.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Totally.
And this is where media literacy comes in, I think.
What do you mean?
Like, we need to learn how to be critical consumers of media.
Oh, interesting.
Not just take everything at face value.
Yeah.
Question what we see. Learn to recognize biases.
Yeah.
You know.
So we can push for better representation.
Exactly. It's about being aware and then taking action.
Totally. Asking those tough questions.
Right. Like, who's missing from this picture? Why?
And what does that say?
Exactly. And on the flip side, who is being highlighted and why?
Right. What are we assuming about them because of their gender?
Yeah, all those assumptions we make without even realizing it.
It's crazy how much we take for granted.
It is. Because these images, they're not just neutral snapshots of reality.
They're constructed.
Exactly. They're choices someone made. And those choices are often influenced by unconscious biases.
Biases we all have.
Yeah, we're all susceptible to them. And they can have real consequences in the world.
It's like we're all shaping the narrative, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, just by engaging with these images, sharing them, liking them.
We could be reinforcing those messages about gender and power.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is.
That we all have this responsibility.
To be more mindful.
About what we consume.
And what we put back out there.
Exactly. We have the power to challenge these biases.
Yeah.
Demand better representation. Create a more equitable visual world.
That's awesome.
It is. It's about realizing We're not just passive bystanders. We can make a difference.
This has been really eye-opening, honestly.
I'm glad to hear that.
I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at the news now.
I hope so.
And hopefully our listeners are feeling inspired too.
To take a closer look at the images around them.
It's like we've got these new glasses on now or something.
Yeah.
We can suddenly see all these messages hiding in plain sight.
It's true. You start noticing all these little things.
Right, like how a photo is framed. Or why they chose that person to be the focus.
Yeah.
Or even just how they cropped the picture.
It's all about choices.
It really is.
Choices that often reflect these unconscious biases we've been talking about.
And the crazy thing is you can't unsee it once you start noticing it.
Right. It's like you've unlocked this secret code.
Totally. Like a visual decoder ring.
Exactly. It gives you this power to see the world differently.
Or maybe even change it.
Yeah. Like we can push for something better,
Demand more balance.
more inclusivity.
Yeah.
It's about realizing we're not just passive consumers of media anymore.
You've got a voice. We've got choices to make.
And those choices actually matter.
I love that. That we're not just stuck with whatever's put in front of us.
Exactly. We shape the narrative too.
By what we choose to see.
And by what we choose to share with others.
It all builds up, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like we're all contributing to this bigger picture.
So what's the big takeaway here?
I think the main thing is to just be more aware.
Okay.
More conscious of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And to be more critical too. Don't just accept everything you see.
Don't take it for granted.
Exactly. Remember, images are powerful.
Oh, totally.
And they can be used to reinforce all these old norms and inequalities.
Or they can be used to challenge them.
Exactly. So ask yourself those tough questions.
Like what?
Like, is this image really reflecting reality? Or is it just showing me a biased view?
Right.
And what can I do to push for something more balanced?
Because even small things can make a difference.
Absolutely. Sharing diverse images.
Speaking up when you see something problematic.
All of that adds up.
Yeah.
Every little bit helps to create a more representative world.
This has been a really amazing deep dive.
It's been fun talking about this.
I feel like I've learned so much about how gender shows up in the news.
It's a complex issue.
It really is. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep those thinking caps on.
Keep questioning what you see. Keep pushing for better.
Because we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, happy scrolling.